Pick up a pen. Hold it for 30 seconds. Something in your brain just changed. Not metaphorically, structurally. The neurons that mark the physical edge of your body have extended themselves to the tip of that pen. You didn't feel it happen. You never do. Your brain runs a real-time map of your body, a precise diagram of every surface, every joint, every point where flesh meets world. That map has a boundary. Most people assume the boundary is the skin, but the skin is a simplification, a story the conscious mind tells itself, not a fact the brain endorses. The actual boundary is dynamic, negotiable, and it moves depending on what you're holding. Your brain doesn't use tools, it absorbs them. By the time you finish reading this sentence, the device in your hand has temporarily become a neurological extension of you, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. The technical term for this is peripersonal space. It is the region of space immediately surrounding your body, close enough to touch, close enough to threaten, close enough to act on. It is a precisely mapped neural territory, encoded by specific neurons in specific brain regions. These neurons were first isolated in the primate brain in the late 1970s, when researchers placed microelectrodes into awake, behaving monkeys to record what made individual cells fire. They found something stranger. Some neurons responded to touch, but also to visual stimuli that hadn't made contact yet. A flash of light near the hand would fire a neuron, even if nothing touched the skin. These were called bimodal neurons. The key word is near. These neurons don't respond to just anything in the visual field. They respond specifically to stimuli within a certain distance of the skin. Each has a tactile zone anchored to the skin, and a corresponding visual zone projecting outward into nearby space. That visual zone typically extends anywhere from a few centimeters to about half a meter from the skin surface. Move the hand left, and the visual field around the hand moves left with it. The brain is maintaining a continuous, body-centered map of the space immediately surrounding you. The two primary regions housing these neurons are area F4 in the premotor cortex and the ventral intraparietal area, known as VIP. VIP lies in the parietal lobe, tucked inside the intraparietal sulcus. Together, F4 and VIP form the core circuit of peripersonal space. They receive converging signals from skin receptors, visual processing areas in the occipital lobe, and auditory cortex. Their output connects directly to motor regions, meaning peripersonal space is not a passive sensory map, but a preparation zone for action. When something enters your peripersonal space, your motor system is already calculating a response. The map exists to protect you and to let you act, simultaneously a shield and a launching pad. The crucial question was whether this map could change. That question was answered in 1996 by neuroscientist Atsushi Iriki and his colleagues at the University of Tokyo. Iriki trained macaque monkeys to retrieve food pellets placed just beyond arm's reach, using a small handheld rake. Before the monkeys used the rake, Iriki's team recorded the visual receptive fields of bimodal neurons in parietal area 7B. As expected, those visual fields ended at or very near the monkey's hand. Then the monkeys used the rake for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Iriki re-recorded the same neurons. The visual receptive fields had expanded, stretching along the full length of the rake, all the way to its tip. The neurons were treating the rake as if it were an elongated part of the monkey's hand. When the rake was withdrawn and the monkey held it passively, without actively using it, the fields contracted back toward the hand. Reaching, gripping, acting through the tool was the trigger. The paper was published in Nature in 1996, and it fundamentally changed how neuroscientists understood the body's boundaries. The body map, it turned out, is not anatomy, it is function. It is defined by what the brain is currently using to interact with the world. Any object the brain deploys for reaching, probing, or acting becomes, neurologically, part of the hand. In a landmark 2004 review in Nature Reviews Neuroscience, Angelo Maravita of the University of Milan and Atsushi Iriki synthesized a decade of evidence on this phenomenon. They described tool use as an extension of the body schema, the brain's internal model of its own physical form. It is a hypothesis the brain constantly revises. The first direct evidence in humans came from Elisabetta Ladavas and Alessandro Farnè at the University of Bologna in the early 2000s. They studied patients with damage to the right parietal cortex, a condition called hemispatial neglect, where patients systematically fail to process stimuli on their left side when competing stimuli appear on their right. The key detail? The deficit was modulated by what the patients were holding. When patients held a tool that extended toward the neglected left side, their ability to detect left side stimuli improved. The tool had pulled the brain's spatial attention into the neglected space. A stick, held in the hand, reshaped the patient's neural map of the world. At Oxford University, Charles Spence developed a measure called the crossmodal congruency task to probe this directly in healthy participants. Simultaneously, a visual flash appears either near the hand or near the tip of a held tool. The task is to identify which hand was touched, ignoring the visual distractor. When the visual flash appears near the tool tip rather than the hand itself, it still interferes with the tactile judgment. The brain treats the tool tip as a hand-adjacent location, as if events at the tip compete with signals from the skin. The tool has been neurologically grafted onto the limb. In 2009, a team led by Lucilla Cardinali at INSERM in Lyon published a paper in Current Biology that made tool incorporation visible in the body's own movements. Participants reached for objects before and after 5 minutes of using a mechanical grabber that extended their reach by 40 centimeters. After using the grabber, their reaching movements changed. Their arms decelerated earlier at the end of each reach, as if the motor system expected the arm to be longer. Their pointing recalibrated for a different arm length than they actually had. This was not confusion. It was the body schema updating itself based on tool use. The brain had temporarily adopted the longer arm as the operative model. Even after the tool was set down, the update persisted for several minutes. The ghost of the tool remained encoded in how the body moved. To understand the mechanism, consider a simpler version of the same principle, the rubber hand illusion. It was first reported by Matthew Botvinick and Jonathan Cohen at Carnegie Mellon University in a 1998 paper in Nature. A participant sits with one hand hidden behind a screen. A rubber hand is placed in front of them, positioned roughly where the real hand would be. An experimenter simultaneously strokes both the rubber hand and the hidden real hand with a paintbrush. Within 60 to 90 seconds, most participants report feeling the brush on the rubber hand. They have incorporated a piece of foam rubber into their body representation. When the rubber hand is then stabbed with a needle, participants show a measurable spike in skin conductance, a physiological startle, as if the real hand were threatened. The brain has adopted the artificial object as tissue. What drives the illusion is temporal synchrony. If the strokes are asynchronous, offset by more than a few hundred milliseconds, the illusion fails completely. The brain is continuously solving an inference problem. Are these signals arriving together because they come from the same source? If yes, it binds them, merging the seen object with the felt body. This is not a flaw in the system. It is the system's core operating logic. Without it, you couldn't learn to drive a car, type on a keyboard, or swing a tennis racket. Peripersonal space serves a second critical function beyond tool use: threat detection. Bimodal neurons in F4 and VIP fire more strongly as objects approach the body. Their rates increase as the distance shrinks. This creates an urgency gradient. The closer the threat, the more the motor system is primed to respond. Research by Vincenzo Ladavas and colleagues showed that stimuli within peripersonal space produce faster and larger defensive reflexes than stimuli in far space. The brain doesn't wait for contact. It begins preparing a response the moment something enters the zone. When you hold a tool, you don't just extend your reach, you extend your threat boundary. An object approaching the tip of the rake is processed as an object approaching your hand. The alarm triggers earlier. You are neurologically larger than your skin. The size of peripersonal space is not constant. It varies between individuals and shifts with context. A 2015 study by Andrea Serino and colleagues found that peripersonal space is substantially larger near the face than near the hands. It is also larger for looming threats. An approaching object expands PPS more than a retreating one. Chronic disuse shrinks it. Patients with long-term limb immobilization show contracted peripersonal representations even in body regions that weren't immobilized. The map is not a record of what your body looks like. It is a record of what your body does. When a surgeon controls a robot arm from a console across the operating room, does that arm get incorporated into their body map? In a 2011 study by Gavin Buckingham and colleagues, participants who remotely controlled a robotic hand showed altered body representations consistent with tool incorporation. The robotic hand had to be seen moving in synchrony with the operator's commands, confirming that temporal synchrony is required even across physical space. The brain extended its map across the room, down a wire, into a machine. The self, in those moments, was distributed. The most ubiquitous modern example is the device in your hand right now. Within moments of active use, scrolling, typing, the screen enters your peripersonal space. Work by Arko Ghosh at the University of Zurich, published in Current Biology in 2015, showed that frequent touchscreen use alters cortical representations of the fingertips. The more intensively individuals used their phones, the more reorganized their somatosensory cortex representation of the thumb and index finger became. The device had reshaped the brain at the level of primary sensory cortex, not just the body schema. The phone in your pocket is not just becoming familiar, it is becoming part of you. Not metaphorically, neurologically. So where does the body end? The traditional answer is, at the skin. The skin is where you stop, and the world begins. But that turns out to be a story, one the conscious mind finds convenient, not one the brain actually runs on. The brain draws its boundary based on function, not anatomy. It asks, what am I currently using to act on the world? Whatever the answer is, that thing is part of you, for as long as you're using it. It is a low-level computational reality, running continuously below awareness. Pick up a hammer. For the next few minutes, the hammer is you. Set it down. The hammer is no longer you. The boundary simply moved. What this reveals is something deeply strange about the nature of the self. The self, at least in its bodily dimension, is not a fixed object. It is a process, a continuous act of incorporation and release. You are not a body that sometimes uses tools. You are a process that temporarily expands to include whatever you're acting through. Think about the first time a human picked up a stick, perhaps 2.5 million years ago, on an African savanna. That stick entered someone's peripersonal space. Their bimodal neurons extended their fields to its tip. The boundary shifted. In some sense, every tool humanity has ever wielded was briefly part of a human nervous system. Every hammer, every scalpel, every brush, every keyboard, incorporated, then released. This is perhaps the most intimate relationship humans have with the objects they make and use. Not ownership, not use, incorporation. Whatever you're holding right now, bimodal neurons are quietly adjusting their fields. The boundary of you is moving outward, without your knowledge or consent. It has been doing this your entire life. Every time you held a pencil, gripped a wheel, pressed a key. The you experiencing this moment is larger than your skin. It always has been.